Everyone, please welcome Jeff to the stage.
I'm going to get to talk about a lot of things I love today. Okay, so first of all, I love gene and cell therapy. It's a new technology that really has a tremendous promise to be world-changing. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on that. But hopefully, how many people in the room consider themselves experts on gene and cell therapy? Zero, that's perfect. Okay, how many people have heard of gene and cell therapy and sort of know what it's about? Now, sort of know how it works? Okay, all right, you're the right audience for me because, a big part of my life is just being sort of a hub to bring all of the things together that we need to make a success. And so my ability to explain it on all different levels is one of the glues that holds AGT together and has brought me some of the greatest employees that you could possibly imagine, and collaborators and advisors and things like that. And I learned this thing from Apple. Zach mentioned that I was at Apple in the 80s, that when you have a disruptive technology that is really special, one of the things that's going to happen is that nobody's going to see it but you. That you have some sort of vision that you may share within your local environment, like in the company. At Apple, we all knew the graphic user interface was the future. Meanwhile, Steve Jobs was going to meetings with the top computer analysts in the world who were just going, the graphic user interface will never sell. I mean, imagine that. Imagine your cell phone with a C prompt on it. Okay, so now you get the idea of like how dumb that was. But remember, it's not really dumb. It's just common wisdom, right? Which I like to say is always common and not as often wise. And that is that, it's been this way for forever, and you can see the trajectory of, sort of the old industry, but you don't get how this thing just changes everything. And I hope one of the things that you'll get in this talk is that gene and cell therapy changes everything. All right? You've heard of the big pharma companies, right? Roche, Pfizer, Merck, right? Novartis. Okay, so, within this small audience of people that are in all different industries, none of us have failed to see those companies as existing, and these are the giants of that industry. So let me name you a couple of other names now. Who here has heard of Burroughs? Okay, very small. The second largest computer company on earth in 1980. All right. How many people here have heard of Sperry Univac? Okay, that's better, but they had they were also a big computer company. They don't sell any computers anymore, you probably know. How about Digital Equipment Corporation? Crushed, gone, right? Burroughs is a great example of it, right? And mark my words here. Remember those names that I just told you? Your children won't remember them. Okay, one of them might save themselves. Remember, IBM's still around. What computers do they make now? None. They install computers for Dell, right? Some really smart guy at the head of IBM, I think his name was Lou Gershon, said, hey, he was brave enough to say to the company that he now inherited, he was in probably one of the most prestigious jobs in the world, right? IBM was like, you never got fired for buying blue. And he had to turn to the board and to the executives and go, hey, folks, we're effed, right? It's over. How are we going to preserve something for after the meteor strikes, right? And I think he preserved what he could. I just said it earlier, nobody gets fired for buying blue. But that's meaningful even if you're just installing Dell computers and software and security and consulting and. So there was a gargantuan part of the company, the sales organization, that actually could function in the new world. And I heard that they just sold off Watson, right? I mean, that's how bad it's gotten, is that They're like, we don't even need to be known as a computer company anymore or as a high-tech, cutting-edge company because, first of all, AI is about to hand us our lunch there or eat our lunch there, right? Okay, this is the way of the world, and gene and cell therapy is the meteor that is about to hit the pharma dinosaurs. None of them, even if there was a pharma executive in this room, he'd just be like rolling his eyes at this, I promise you. And they have more credibility than me. But mark my words anyway, all right? So that if in 10 years you're starting to see some of them on the bubble, and in 20 years they're gone, you'll go, yeah, I actually heard that 20 years ago. All right, you're going to be telling a lot of things to your grandchildren. It'll be interesting stories that'll surround, this disruptive technology. So, okay. The other thing I'm going to get to talk about that I really love is Montgomery County and Maryland. All right, because I think that we're going to get an outsized portion of the new business that's going to come from this industry. And how much is that going to be? Well, if you believe Goldman Sachs, they say a mere $5 trillion in new economic activity. All right, and we're number 3 region in the nation for this. Okay, really the DMV, but I'll argue that that's really mostly Maryland. Okay. Now, what is the entire economic activity of the DMV? It's about $1 trillion. Could we get another $1 trillion in business? Sure. And it'll be concentrated in what I call DNA Valley, which is Rockville to Frederick to Baltimore, because that is where it's happening. This is where it's growing organically. And why is that? It's because of the implosion or explosion of the Human Genome Project. And you're like, yeah, the Human Genome Project started this. In a way, sort of the way that Texas Instruments started the microcomputer industry, right? That the US government said, this is interesting technology, we should buy a boatload of it. That actually has collateral benefits, to all of society. And nobody else can afford that kind of investment. And they said, let's just put a calculator on everybody's desk in the government. That could be useful. And this birthed the microcomputer industry in the same way that a $6 trillion federal investment in Maryland for the Human Genome Project and the Ventnor Institute, or Ventnor Institute, 2 competing companies that were sequencing the genome that came up with, a stack of A, C, T, G, D, G, A, T, C, T, T, T. What does that mean? Nothing, right? But our ability to read those things meant a lot because it created an industry around those things because we could see them clearly for the first time. It brought sequencing down. It brought it down in a way that would, Moore of Moore's Law recently passed away. I'm telling you, he would spin in his grave to think about, what's going on in biotech right now. And it's because of that investment. So think about that when you're paying your taxes, by the way, because I'm a weirdly liberal pro-tax guy. I know we all hate taxes, but this is what paid for it. Public investment, and it is going to benefit all of us with cures to everything that kills us, right? Because this industry isn't about, computing and AI and stuff like this. This is about health. This is about, repairing our bodies from diseases. It's about cures instead of lifelong treatments. It is about living better, happier, healthier lives. And, what could be more important? So one of the things I'll tell you is that I think that Goldman Sachs is way off in their number. Way off. This is a $20 trillion industry if it's a penny. All right? And could we get 10% of that in this area? We could. And it has to do with those ACTGs. Because what was born there that day was not significant in that we finally, got 1, or actually 2, human genomes, because none of us in this room have the same genome. But it was the first time that we actually knew how many genes were in our body. So we could go, well, here are all the genes. We had no idea what they did, but at least we could see them now. And we also got technology that allowed us to knock them out and see what happened, or put them in and see what happened. Right? So we can manipulate that stuff, and we could start experimenting with the human genome. And that has exploded, you know, from all the PhDs that were trained at those places that were then let go. They birthed DNA Valley. They didn't know it at the time, but every single one of them had this dream of, we just take one of those genes and cure something. Right? That's what they used to say at the Human Genome Project. Every time they sequenced another gene, they were there. There's another company. You know, in a way, they're right, because there are 7,000 what are called monogenic loss of function disorders. Okay, and you may not have even heard that term before, but 1 in 10 people has one of those. And the spending globally on that is $2 to $4 trillion per year in palliative treatments that just keep them comfortable until they die. Because the monogenic disease could be anything from lactose intolerance, you know, irritating, to spinal muscular atrophy, where you die in a ventilator by age 4. Right? So we're talking about, you know, quite a range in here. And we're talking about that you couldn't do anything about those things. You're missing a gene. That's what monogenic, one gene, loss of function, missing, can lead to in your body. So if you don't know anybody with a monogenic, you know, disorder, that is more rare than the rare diseases, quite frankly. Because we see, you know, we know these people. They're our friends and our neighbors, or they're our neighbors' kids, or whatever, right? That are dealing with something, and instead of us being able to cure that, what are we doing? We just treat it. We just try to make them comfortable. That's the way spinal muscular atrophy used to be. You know, you knew your kid was born with spinal muscular atrophy. They would never sit up. They would never roll over. They would never walk. They would spend their entire life in a wheelchair with their head cradled, being able to sometimes flop their head side to side, but mostly just move their eyes. What a way to go, you know, 4 years like that, and then it's over. But now there's 12-year-olds running around who were born with spinal muscular atrophy because they figured out what gene was driving that, and they figured a way to jam that gene back into those kids, and it works. And that's the basic idea behind gene therapy. Okay, so I'm describing to you gene therapy, is that we have the ability to deliver genes into the human genome. And what that means is that if you're missing one, there's a possibility of sticking it in there. And if you've got spinal muscular atrophy, and we stick that gene in there, you're not treated, you're no longer sick. You've got what you needed. You are normal, right? And that's what's so exciting about gene and cell therapy is, like, we're not really curing diseases, we're literally like getting rid of them, right? 7,000 monogenic diseases, $2 to $4 trillion. That's probably where, you know, the Goldman Sachs got their figure from, right? But, you know, here's where I describe gene therapy really quickly to you, so that you all realize that you will maybe one day be a gene and cell therapy developer, right? That you could make a drug. So, who's heard of viruses after COVID? Okay, so viruses have been around for 1.5 billion years, competing with, you know, mammals and other types of animals. There are even viruses that attack bacteria. They're called phages. But, you know, they've been around, and actually, you know, our lives, whether we realize it or not, is a competition with bacteria and viruses. And we have immune systems which are really good at protecting us from those things. But, you know, every once in a while a virus comes along that we're not ready for. And so we feel sick temporarily, or we die. You know, if it's Ebola, you're going to die, right? If it's HIV and you don't treat it for life, by the way, right? Because HIV is just a virus. By the way, nobody's ever died of HIV. Does everybody know that? You die of AIDS, consequence of HIV. Because HIV has this ability to do what? Install genes permanently in cells. And what does it install? It installs a copy of itself, basically instructions on how to make more virons to infect more cells. And actually, it is one of the weakest, lamest viruses in one respect that you'll ever hear of, because it moves so slowly through your body. Imagine a virus that takes 10 years to kill you, right? And you're like, yeah, that's a pretty wussy virus. Ebola would, finish you off like that. But it's one of the reasons we have so little Ebola in the world. Because you become symptomatic and bleed from the eyes. I mean, like, who's going to go near you, first of all? And you're going to be dead so fast that you didn't have time to pass it around. But in 10 years, doing stuff we love, how do you pass HIV, right? That's why, on one hand, it's a wussy virus, and on the other hand, it's the most fascinating evolved virus in the world. And one of its evolutionary things is that it does more than most viruses. Like, when you get COVID, it starts blowing up cells. It moves quickly through your body, right? And you either get over it or you don't. Most people get over it, right? And we've developed a vaccine for it, which is, by the way, a very narrow slice of gene and cell therapy. That's what those lipid, mRNA vaccines are. Just the narrowest slice of gene therapy. So, but the HIV virus has the ability to not just drop like new instructions into the cell and get it to go crazy and make copies. No, it can, sneak through the cytoplasm, break into the manager's office, the nucleus, pick the lock on the DNA safe, and just throw a few things in there that the cell never even knows about. And it slowly just kind of takes up those instructions like any other instruction in the DNA. Now, everybody here is probably familiar with ACTG, right? What is that? The nucleotides that make up your DNA. Okay. How many people here are familiar with zeros and ones of your personal computer and your cell phone? What's the difference between zeros and ones and ACTG? Base 2, base 4. Okay? Right? You have 4 symbols over here, that's base 4. If you have 10 symbols, 0 through 9, it's base 10. Okay, 2, but you can express the same numbers, right? What is your computer doing? Every unique number is a unique command. What is your cell doing? Every unique number is a unique command. Okay? The human cell is the most sophisticated computer on Earth. All right? It is so much better than your personal computer. It even works in the materials that it's made out of. Right? Your computer can only take zeros and ones and convert them into other zeros and ones, and if you didn't have what are called A to D converters and D to A converters, you wouldn't be able to make pictures, you wouldn't be able to have sensor technology. All that stuff is just all converting into zeros and ones and converting back from zeros and ones. So it's a combination of analog circuitry and digital circuitry that allow you to get on a Zoom call across the world, right? But the human cell not only communicates electronically, like your computer's network, but chemically and physically with that. It's like your body is a network of 37 trillion collaborating computers, all running off the same operating system, DNA, but all finding just the parts of the DNA that are necessary for each one of those cells to collaborate on that giant network. The human computer, okay, the organic computer is so sophisticated, it has a command. There's a series of ACTGs that says, make a copy of me. A human cell can birth another organic computer. How'd you like it if your iPhone could do that? That would really make your family plan at Verizon real cheap. It's like, I need another computer. Boom. Right? This is the amazing thing that we all possess, right? And the only reason that we haven't leveraged that command set is why? This computer didn't come with a manual. And here we are, back at the Human Genome Project again. We finally could read the manual, and we're starting to translate the manual, and we're learning about what? How genetics affects biology, and all comes together to make you. And at the same time, we have what are called viral vectors and other editing techniques that allow us to change that code. So, when I look out here, that's what I see. Each one of you, 37 trillion organic computers. And what do I know about software? Not only is it not perfect, right? It's got bugs, which we talked about, but it can be improved. We can keep enhancing it. All right, so this wonderful virus, HIV, I bet you haven't heard that wonderful in HIV in one sentence in a while, but it gave us the ability to make permanent edits very reliably in cells. And there's 38 million people out there, plus another 30 million people that have died of various things since then. So we've seen 60 to 70 million cases of HIV on Earth so far. And what do we know about them? Not a lot of side effects besides what HIV, what the consequential outcome is of having HIV and not treating it, right? Because what happens is that it depletes out all the HIV protection first, and then it starts to deplete out the protection to other pathogens that might come in contact with your body. And then one day a pathogen where your T cells have been depleted out comes along, and that's called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. That's what kills you, right? And by the way, just so everybody understands in here, something that many people don't understand, and very important to understand, people that are infected with HIV are no danger to anybody else that they're not intimate with, at least, and I mean really intimate. You can't get HIV by kissing somebody who's infectious or shaking their hand or hugging them or getting sweat on you or any of that stuff. It doesn't pass that way, right? It passes blood-to-blood contact, and even when that happens, it's only a 1 in 10 chance to pass it, but that's why it's so important to know about this disease, because, when you have a behavior where you have a 90% chance of not being hurt, but you keep that behavior up over and over and over again, what happens? 90% of 90%, for any people in here who understand statistics, the chances of avoiding it is going down by 10%, every single time, until your chances of avoiding it are like 2% or 1% or 0%, right? Okay. So you should never be scared of HIV. It shouldn't occupy your nightmares like it did when I was in college back in the 80s. And also, it's very important because one of the things that we do at AGT is try to break some of the stigma. So that's why the little tangential thing here. Okay, but HIV has shown us that, okay, what are the side effects? A little bit more cancer. There's a lot of inflammation associated with it. There's liver, kidney, heart disease that comes from it, like all the things you hear about on the Biktarvy ads. And the Biktarvy ads also mention a bunch of things that come from how we treat it, which is a toxic chemotherapeutic, right? So, after you've been on that long enough, you've been taking chemicals for a long, long time. There's a cost. But, besides that, it's pretty good stuff. The fact that we can go in there and we can make changes and we can start to do what? Add software that can improve your body. Now, the most obvious thing to do, right? So the process is this. We take HIV and we crack it open and we scoop out AIDS. All the instructions that just copy HIV, right? And we throw that away. What's left over? The shell, which is a stealth bomber that will deliver anything that we want. Okay, you're all gene therapy drug developers now. You can let your imagination run wild. You can look up the disease that you're interested in, and usually the first thing that comes up is the NIH website, and it tells you exactly how that disease manifests itself. And it's usually genetic, right? You're missing this pathway. And now all that stuff is like within scope, because all we do then is we get that human gene, we stick it in that little, we call it an envelope, but the shell, and we deliver it to the cells that are missing it. Now they're not missing it anymore, so the disease is gone. Now, I made it sound really, really simple. It is rocket science. I can't even do this in the cell culture hood, but I can lead a company that is the cutting edge company in this. And also, I have a vision for much more than just the monogenic diseases, which you'll see that's what everybody is treating out there. I mean, almost everybody is treating, right? This is what you're hearing about. Oh, hemophilia, cured. Spinal muscular atrophy, cured. That's a crippling disease. A form of blindness, cured, right? This is the stuff of miracles. Blind people are seeing, I kid you not. Crippled people are walking, and it's only a matter of time till we heal the lepers. And it's science, right? But we can do much more than those monogenic diseases. We can improve cells so they do their job better. That's how we're curing HIV at AGT. We have a successful phase 1 in HIV cure. It's right down the road, 3-minute drive from here, in Montgomery County in Maryland, 2 places that I love. All right. So what, how did we do it? It sounds, we've been chasing this for 40 years. We got great treatments, right? Used to be a death sentence for the first 15 years. On the last slide, there was a guy, Marcus Conan, our CMO, but he was on the front lines of the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco, and he lost 3,000 patients from 1981 to 1994. They died of AIDS. Not a good way to go. And then he was part of trials that turned that death sentence into a life sentence of taking pills. Used to be a handful of pills, but it's getting better. Now they're actually coming up with things where people can get injections once every 2 months. You've probably heard those ads. Cabenuva, right? It's all the same chemical, but a time-release one in your butt, right? In your butt cheeks or whatever. So, but the idea being that they have made a death sentence a life sentence. But a cure would be a get-out-of-jail card, right? And that's what everybody longs for in the HIV community, and I hope everybody has some empathy for that. Because it isn't even the physical pain of the side effects of the chemotherapy or the inflammation from HIV that, is hurting their quality of life. It is our misunderstanding of them, right? It is the fact that we can go to a restaurant in Washington, D.C. right now, and the waiter could come over and say, incidentally, ladies, gentlemen, I just wanted to let you know I'm gay. And what would they say? It's fine, can I get a glass of water? Right? But now imagine that person coming over and going, I just wanted to let you know I'm HIV positive. Right? Think of the, right? How that would tense you up. And it's natural to feel that way. So I'm not, railing on anybody who is scared of HIV. But understanding would release these people from an additional prison that they're in today, right? Which is the stigma and the isolation, right? And being closeted again, right? For some of them. Because here's another misunderstanding. The first thing you'd assume about your waiter is he must be gay and promiscuous, right? Wrong. That's the important thing to understand, right? Viruses don't select. We can't dominate them with our minds. We can't be good people and avoid viruses. We can't follow the right leader and avoid viruses, right? Viruses are equal opportunity infectors for anybody. And in the early days, that was it just happened to strike that community first. And as a result, and nobody's forgotten it for some weird reason, right? But that's the reality of it, okay? Anyway, again, I continue to digress. But what are we doing? Well, HIV only gets into your body because the sentinel T cell that is there to detect the pathogen and instruct the entire immune system to mount a immune cascade against it. Cytotoxic CD8 cells and B cells that will create antibodies to slow it down, and then the CD8 cytotoxic cells will kill infected cells. And did you know that one of the amazing things about your cells is they display what they're doing inside on their surface through something called the MHC molecule. So they don't even have to start popping out HIV virons. If you have CD8 cells in your body that are looking for HIV, they can detect it in the cell and kill the cell and take it offline immediately. And the amount of HIV that the average HIV person has in their body is teeny. But the problem is it's persistent because it's installed in their genes, right? Okay, so you've got no weapon against it. And why? Because that viron, when it meets the CD4 cell, the general of the immune army, instead of the general killing it, taking out its sidearm and then going back and going, hey, if there's one, there's got to be more. Let's get ready for this, guys, gals. Let's get out there on the battlefield. That's the CD8s and the B cells. What happens is it infects the general. Now this one is a soldier in HIV's army. It's actually one of the best spreaders of HIV in the body that you could get, because it immediately upon stimulation starts replicating in the lymph nodes where it passes it even to other T cells, right? So that is the moment that people lose the war. Well, what if that general had body armor on it so it could resist that initial attack? What would it do? Its job. And if it could do its job, how hard would it be to clear the wimpiest virus on Earth? Not very hard. It's literally harder to clear COVID in your body than it is to clear HIV. The amount of T cell activity and stuff like that is far below. Right? There are people that are born immune to HIV or forms of HIV, not 100%, but the common forms. They don't even feel it when it comes into their body. And why is that? Because it can't get an initial hold before it gets eliminated.
Is it because their general has the armor necessary?
They have part of it. That's right. That's why they're immune. This is how we discovered this, and I don't want to go too deep into it because it's so technical, but yes. The question was, is that because they naturally have the body armor? They have part of it. Turns out that HIV viron grabs onto two surface receptors, CCR5 and CD4. So these are CD4 T cells. They all have CD4. But it turns out some people can be born without CCR5, and it needs to get onto both of them to do the iron cross and get into the cell, right? What happens when the guy on the rings only gets one ring? What's the chances of him doing an iron cross? 0. Right? And that's the protection from only R5 strains of the virus. That's a natural protection. So we said, okay, let's improve the cells. Let's strip that door handle, just like those people that are born without the door handle. And you could do that with gene therapy by installing a gene that makes siRNAs. This is technical again, but the siRNAs bind to the message from the CCR5 gene. And when they bind, that message becomes unusable by the cell. It's like shutting off that instruction in the computer. And when it doesn't make CCR5, it's not refreshing the CCR5 on the outside of the cell. And without refreshing it, it all breaks off. And now they're CCR5 negative, and they're immune to the most common forms of HIV. But we did more than that. We actually put in that same gene, we put in siRNAs against conserved regions of all known genomes of HIV. So you've heard that some people are immune to HIV. You've heard that they've done bone marrow transplants where they took somebody who was immune and they transferred their bone marrow into somebody that had HIV, and that person was miraculously cured only on about 50% of the viruses. Right? They could still get an X4 tropic virus that doesn't need CCR5 to get in. But we put in siRNAs that block it 2 other ways and go across all known strains of HIV. And that's our improvement. That's our body armor. And all we do is we pull cells out of somebody that's well controlled on antiretrovirals, so they have the full diversity of their immune system, including their HIV T cells back. Why don't they work? Because they didn't work the first time. So if you remove the viral suppression, the virus comes up, they'll just start the infection cycle again, take out all the HIV generals, right, HIV fighting generals, and you'll be back to the acute disease again. So, they're well controlled, and these cells are all back. We pull them out, give them body armor, amp them up so that they've got about 10 times the number of generals that somebody has when they clear a viral pathogen, put it back into the body, and they should theoretically be able to throw away their meds and never think of HIV again, because they will suppress it naturally with their immune system, so they can't infect anybody. They can never get AIDS, and actually the immune system will last for life, so they can't get it back. Right? So that this is their dream come true. 38 million people, and I hear from them all the time. They're in pain. HIV is invisible because Hollywood's not making movies anymore, and people aren't showing up with Kaposi sarcoma, at least in, sort of in the places that we tend to go. Right? So we think it's cured unless we know somebody that has it, or we study it like, AGT does. So we understand what's going on here, and it's still at epidemic levels, 30 to 50,000 new infections in the United States every year. Polio was only 60,000 at its peak. So it's a big deal. Anyway, we improve those cells, and they're cured. What can we do beyond improving cells? We could reprogram cells as little bots to do anything in your body. It's already being done. It's called CAR T. They took T cells that generally fight disease, and they put new instructions in there that gave them a new, what's called antigen receptor, that made them perfect hunter-killers of B cells. And you're like, why would you want to kill all the B cells in your body? Well, what if you had a B cell lymphoma? What if you were at death's door because you couldn't stay on top of it anymore with chemotherapy or radiation? Would you give up all your B cells in order to keep living? Especially when you know that all it means is a shot every day of antibodies. You can replace it, right? Well, ask anybody that's got diabetes. Is it better to die or take a shot every day? It's better to take a shot every day, right? Okay, so CAR T, although it's like taking a sledgehammer to cancer, it's not selective between, this healthy B cell and this, cancerous B cell. And it even has to persist because that cancer could be in your bone marrow, so you could be creating new cancerous B cells, so it sits in your body and keeps killing those new ones too, right? But it works. It's a bot, something that didn't exist in nature. And we made it because we learned how to program the cell. What about a bot that clears plaque from your circulatory system, from your veins and arteries, turns it into sugar? Why not? What about a bot that repairs the myelin for people that are suffering from demyelinization, which would be like, MS and Lou Gehrig's disease, and, there's a whole bunch of, neuronal disorders. Now we're getting into what's called regenerative medicine. It's all one spectrum. So we're talking about a world where we cure everything that kills you. Then it's the fountain of youth, because what about something that just restores your 20-year-old skin and your 20-year-old hair and your 20-year-old ability to build muscle? We'll all be living like 20-year-olds for 150 years probably, right? That's a pretty utopic kind of world. I mean, it's got a lot of policy issues, okay, so it's, it's not a slam dunk. Unfortunately, I don't have to think about it because it's, 50 years away probably. But what happens after that? We control our evolution, right? We can design human beings for better sustainability, for better, durability, for better ability to collaborate and survive in this world, right? That is your 200-year vision, and we're at the beginning of that. And you're already seeing there's like 30 approved miracle cures out there from gene and cell therapy already. Terminal diseases that are no longer terminal. Lifelong suffering that is ended. And not by, by passing away. I mean, by being repaired and having a normal life, like a 12-year-old that's running around that was born with spinal muscular atrophy, or a 15-year-old kid who's hitting a baseball that was blind a few years ago, or somebody that's driving who was blind, right? Okay, so that is what we've got here. Now, why do I think it's a $20 trillion industry? Because, healthcare is already 10, and we can't cure anything. Well, barely. But when we can cure 10,000 diseases, okay, monogenic diseases, improve cells to fight virus, right? And remember, when we crack open a virus and we scoop out the bad code and throw it away and we put good code in that makes you better, what is that doing? We're converting viruses into updates. Anybody who has a cell phone or a computer can understand that, right? What do updates do? Make your operating system better, stronger. It might clear viruses. It might give it new features. It might repair something that was a bug, right? That's why it's so exciting. That's why I jump out of bed every day, because the potential of this is just unimaginable, and very few people are imagining it, especially not the pharma companies right now, because they have a model that they've been great at, that's hard to stop, even if somebody at the top. I mean, Lou Gershon was amazing not just because he had vision. He was amazing because he could take a dinosaur and turn it into a cougar or whatever, right? Like, I always like to say that giant organizations become entities. Entities have DNA, right? Where's the DNA of a 30,000 or 300,000 person organization? It's in those cubes, the cells, that have been doing the same thing over and over and over again for years, and they can't imagine that the world would change in a way where they would be obsolete, right? And that creates natural resistance about the organization of evolving, right? And it also resists change, which is why they all think I'm crazy. 100% of them. Hopefully I've convinced you, maybe he's not so crazy after all. I think there's evidence out there at this point. Okay, DNA Valley. So I proudly renamed it that. I think it was called that at one point and they dropped the moniker, but I think it's appropriate. And of course, you know, the first thing the naysayers say is, well, it's not really a valley. Okay, I get it, Silicon Valley is really a valley, all right, but this is so similar to Silicon Valley, this is DNA Valley. Everything applies. It's the epicenter of viral vectors already. RegenXBio, Lentigen, you know. It is the coveted spot where people send their gene and cell therapy companies to grow and drink from the same font that we all enjoy and didn't even realize it was here. Where did that font come from? Well, one was government investment. It attracted PhDs and trained them from all over the world, and they stayed. The other part was one of the things that Maryland's really good at, and Montgomery County is especially good at, who knows what I'm going to say? Education. Smart people make good workers. STEM graduates used to be 90,000 too many STEM graduates coming out of not Montgomery County, but Maryland schools. And then they distribute themselves across the United States to find enough jobs. But now it's the opposite. You can't get enough of them, right? But that is something that we've done really well, right? We had respect for the idea that, you know, what founded Apple and what founded AGT is true. Smart people, right, that are educated in how to think and how to learn, that are self-disciplined, lifetime learners, curious minds, right, perform. And if they have passion, that's the secret sauce in my mind. They find something that they love. You know, everybody goes, oh, if you work at something you love, you never work a day in your life. Well, that's BS. Trust me, I love what I'm doing, but it is constant stress, crises, problems to solve, and whatever. I like to take the more Buddhist idea, which is, you know, life is hard and then you die, and you find your joy between the stress points. But you see, if you're doing something fulfilling that you believe in and you actually love, yeah, the BS is worth it, right? You're not in pain all the time going, why, you know. You're actually like doing stuff. And what would be more fulfilling to anybody in this room, and I hope I get a unanimous amen on this, than to lift up 1 million people, to ease their suffering, to prevent their deaths. Now you know why I'm so passionate, right? I get to do this. How lucky am I? Right? All right. But we'll all enjoy DNA Valley, because if it brings in another $1 trillion worth of business, that's a lot per capita. That's growth opportunities. I don't care what you do. And that's the real estate reference, right? I come from Silicon Valley, victim of its own success and bounded by the ocean, so it has no room to grow, a problem we don't have, right? It's a long way to the ocean from where we're sitting right now. And we have every kind of lifestyle within a 25-minute ride. Oh, I like horses, I like city, I like that. It's like, what could be better, right? The traffic, you think it's bad, but go to Silicon Valley and then come back here and tell me it's bad. And the weather, you're like, well, Silicon Valley has better weather. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Not lately.
Yeah, I know. I don't miss it. Yeah, climate change could change that entirely, right? And, you know, those same things that I was telling you about in gene and cell therapy, you know, lifetime learners that are engaged could save us from, you know, climate change as well. I mean, there's a lot of big threats out there. Cancer is one of them that gene and cell therapy will cure. Right? 1 in 3 people will get a cancer in their lifetime. Okay, so big things are possible when we all collaborate as human beings, but that's my last slide. So, you know, the growth and the demand for everything will give us, you know, what I consider a very high-class problem. I already talked about AGT, so what's the high-class problem? How do we grow like that? Because remember, we're only about $400 billion in economic activity across all of Maryland. A lot of that is actually farming, you know? So imagine, you know, okay, let's say we get $1 trillion. Wow. Potomac houses, like when I go to Potomac, I'm like, wow, this is really good prices because I come from Silicon Valley, right? I can't believe it. You can get 10 acres in a mansion for $5 million? Holy cow. And you can actually do that for way less than $5 million. But in Silicon Valley, forget it. Right? Okay, so one of our challenges is how do we grow, you know, without losing our lifestyle? And I think we have, you know, more room to grow, and then a little bit of planning, right? Continued good government that backs education and also thinks about how do we maximize this for the common person around here. You know, one of the things I really love about Montgomery County is the diversity. I've never been to a place where I felt like the place was so in tune with my, just, I don't know, ethos, ethic, whatever. I don't even know how to describe it, but I grew up in Boston, high-tech, liberal area. I spent 30 years in Silicon Valley, high-tech, liberal area, but not that diverse, actually. And then I came here and I'm like, oh, wow. You know, it's my utopia. We all live together. Right? There's every economic class. There are so many different backgrounds, ethnicities, you know, religions, races, all living together in Montgomery County in a way that I think could be an example for the country and the world, you know, where the rule of law and the American dream, which is opportunity, not getting rich, right? Of course, American dream has been, if I could say, bastardized to everybody can be rich, or that's the dream is we can come here and the streets are paved with gold and we'll be rich. No, it used to be, it was a great place to be poor because you could survive and you were never murdered for your point of view. That's changing too, but we could fix that. And it's not happening in Montgomery County, you know, like it is in a lot of the country, all right? But it's because of our diversity, it's because of our tolerance, because of we've got better things to do than fight with each other. We could actually collaborate and do great things. So that's what all we need to do to turn high-class problems into opportunity for all, right, is to just do what's best about human beings. And in my mind, that is, you know, why do we dominate the planet so much that even Mother Nature has to fear us now? It's because I can talk to you about things that are more than physical in our reality. I can talk to you about concepts. I can touch your mind and your heart at the same time. And when people's minds and hearts are engaged, remember, we can move mountains in groups, and we can communicate in big groups, and we can do tremendous good. Or, if we're not smart about it, we can do tremendous bad. All right, and we've seen examples in history of both. But I think that, you know, Montgomery County's on the right trajectory, and I'd love to bring $1 trillion more epicentered right here, and I'd like to see that spread out more, right? That's sort of like, this could be another dream come true for me besides actually helping a bunch of people, right? Remember, Zach mentioned I was retired. I made enough money in Silicon Valley that I looked at my bank account one day and I realized I didn't have to work. And so what did I do? I retired at age 42. I'm sure at one time we all thought that would be a cool thing to do, and it was cool for a few years. And then it was boring. I got married. That kept it interesting for another couple of years, but then finally I got tired of following my wife around, carrying her bags and only seeing her from behind. And I was like, I need something for me, some intellectual stimulation, and that's when I met Roscoe Brady at NIH, and he showed me the viral vector. And what did I think? I thought, you just showed me the diskette for the organic computer, because I come from Silicon Valley, and I just had a vision for the future, and I know it's right. 15 years later, I don't just know it's right, I have data to prove it. All right, and that's where we're going. Okay, that is our opportunity together as a community. That is something that touches every single one of us. That is, you know, to me, something to be excited about. And we're at ground zero of something really, really great. So, thank you.